Greetings. This week we're going to talk about writing and revising for the business world. The process of writing for business is similar to what you've seen in your other courses. First, you'll identify your audience. Knowing your audience tells you how formal you need your message to be, as well as how much jargon you're allowed to use due to the audience's familiarity with your subject. Second, you identify your purpose so that you can get to it quickly. Third, you'll brainstorm content because you want to make sure that you say everything you need to say in one message. Fourth, you'll organize that content so that it's going to make sense to your receiver. And fifth, you'll draft it. The difference between writing for business and writing in other contexts is that as you go through the writing process, you want to keep in mind the goal that time is money in the business world, and therefore you do not want to waste anyone's time. And in order to do that, you need to be effective in your message, but also write it as concisely as possible. The most common message you'll send at work is an email. Here's some tips for writing business emails. First, choose your greeting according to the company norms. For example, if your company uses very formal greetings, you should always be formal in your greeting. If your company uses informal greetings, you should be informal. Show that you belong. The rule of thumb is to watch to see what your supervisor does and then mimic that yourself. Second, use descriptive subject lines. Not only will this help your receiver anticipate the importance of the message, but also it will help them find the message later should they have to retrieve it. Third, use BCC conservatively. This blind carbon copy function allows you to send an email while copying a recipient that only you can see has been copied. This can be dangerous in the business world because it allows information to be sent to unknown recipients and sometimes allows information to go places it should not. If you are the reason that information leaks through the choice of blind carbon copy, then you are liable for that information leak. The rule of thumb here is to never blind carbon copy someone unless a supervisor instructs you to do so in writing. That way, if you get in trouble for it later on, you can point to the documentation that shows you were doing your job. Next, send emails only to the people who need it. We've all been the victim of overused listservs before. When people send you emails, or organizations send you emails consistently that do not apply to you, eventually they just become spam. You delete them without ever opening the messages. You do not want to become someone's spam, so be selective in who you choose to send messages to. Next, keep emails short. You would never write more in an email than you would in one page of a word processing system. You also want to keep your paragraphs short to help your reader skim. No more than 3 to 5 sentences per paragraph. And finally, always use an electronic signature. If you have not built an electronic signature with your student email account yet, and you need help doing so, let me know. I'd be happy to assist you. On Blackboard, you'll see that there are templates for each of the types of document we're going to talk about today. Here's a screenshot from that email format. Notice that emails are single-spaced. All text is left aligned with no indentation. There is a single blank line between blocks, such as the greeting, paragraphs, and signature. Notice that your closing, regards, and name of the sender do not have a blank line in between, but there is a blank line between the sender's name and their electronic signature. Electronic signatures at a minimum include your name, any titles you may have, your affiliation, and your contact information. A less common business document is the memo. Memos are what you send when for some reason you need more than a page to get your message across. If you write a memo, write it in a word processing document and then attach it to an email. Never copy and paste a memo directly into the body of an email. Not only is the formatting going to look terrible, but if it were appropriate for email, you would have already sent it that way. Memos are the great-great-grandfather of email. Because of this, when you format them, you actually begin by typing that beginning information that is automatically populated in an email: to, from, date, and subject. Notice there's a single blank line between each of those rows. Also, that to, from, date, and subject are capitalized, while the information beside them is in title case. After the subject line, there are 2 blank lines, followed by your first paragraph. Like with emails, the body of your memo will be single-spaced, left aligned with no paragraph indentations, and with a single blank line between each paragraph. Letters are arguably the most formal of business documents. You always want to default to the most formal setting you have when writing letters. You also want to always be sure to use a letterhead. If you don't already have a company letterhead to use, then you need to create your own in order to have a truly formal letter. That letterhead is going to include your name and your contact information. Letters typically go into more detail than email, so your paragraphs will typically be composed of 5 to 7 sentences. When you write a letter, and again, this is under the assumption that you are using a letterhead that contains your contact information, the first line is going to be the date, followed by 3 blank lines, the receiver's physical address, which may take some research on your part to find, a blank line, your greeting, and notice that, again, letters always default to the formal greeting, which is name and colon, another blank line, the body of your letter, as we've seen before, single space, left align, no indentations, 1 blank line between paragraphs, a closing, then 3 blank lines and your name. It's crucial to have 3 blank lines between the closing and typed version of your name so that you have space to sign. Microsoft Word does not default to allowing business format. You have to change the settings in order to get any document in business format in Word. To do that, in the Home tab, you'll see a little arrow by the word paragraph. In this screenshot, it's circled in green. Clicking on that arrow will produce the menu you see in the center of the screen. The green box indicates the information you have to change. The default in Microsoft Word is to have no blank space before paragraphs, but 8 points of blank space after, and to use multiple line spacing. You have to change those defaults so that there are 0 points of space before and after paragraphs, and that you're using true single spacing. Sometimes when you're writing, you'll find that you struggle to find the right words. We call this writer's block. The 3 leading causes of writer's block are procrastination, impatience, and perfectionism. When we procrastinate or we're impatient with ourselves, we often find that we give ourselves pep talks or antagonistic prompts. Hurry up, you're almost out of time, or come on, why can't I do this? If your working memory is filled with these messages to yourself, there's not a lot left to allow you to actually compose the message. So don't procrastinate and be patient with yourself. Also, remember, there are multiple effective ways to convey a message in business. Don't stress yourself looking for a non-existent perfect option. Again, a primary goal in business writing is to be concise. If you have trouble being verbose, you might want to try writing in E-prime. E-prime, which stands for English prime, is a style of writing without helping verbs, so without the use of is, are, be, been, was, were, or am. Take this example. Dr. Kelly is going to give a quiz next Friday at 11 o'clock. It will be multiple choice, fill in the blank. Both sentences in this first example have helping verbs, is and be. If those sentences in E-prime, it states, next Friday at 11 o'clock, Dr. Kelly will give a multiple choice, fill in the blank quiz. The same information is conveyed, but it's 27% shorter. Writing without helping verbs is always more concise than writing with them. So this is a way to help you learn to write more concisely if you struggle with that. Every year, I go to the career fair and I ask the recruiters about their pet peeves. These are 7 things that I hear about every single year. So I call them the 7 deadly sins of business writing. These are things I want you to be especially careful to not do, because as these are pet peeves for our recruiters, they're things they're very likely to notice and things that are very likely to reflect poorly upon you. The first is telling them what your name is in the body of a message. Dear Mr. Smith, my name is. Well, there's a place in every business document for your name to go. It's never in the body of the message. Don't waste their time telling them what your name is when they already know where to find it. The second is using passive voice. Passive voice is a style of writing in which you put the emphasis on something other than the subject of the sentence. For example, Stephanie gave a presentation is an active voice because the action and the emphasis are on Stephanie. But the presentation was given by Stephanie is in passive voice, which puts the emphasis on the presentation rather than the subject, which is Stephanie. Passive voice is problematic because it's unnecessarily long. It also sometimes misconstrues the point of your message. One example that I hear consistently that annoys recruiters is starting sentences with, I would like to thank you for. For example, after an interview, I would like to thank you for interviewing me. This is problematic in two ways. First, you never thank them. I would like to thank you for interviewing me, but I'm not going to. Second, it's unnecessarily long. Just say, thank you for interviewing me. It's more concise and it actually thanks them. The third deadly sin is indenting paragraphs. Don't do this. It makes it look like you do not have good business training. Fourth is including a greeting after a greeting. For example, Dear Mr. Smith, hello. Dear Mr. Smith is a greeting. It means hello, so only greet them once. Fifth is misspelling resume. You're never going to submit your resume to someone. It doesn't make sense. Not only is spelling resume as resume a blatant misspelling, it also gives recruiters a reason to question your technical skills. There are many, many, many ways to call forth accent marks. On most computers, if you'll hold down the Alt key, type 0233 and release the Alt key, that will produce this particular E with an accent mark. Sixth is paragraphs with less than 3 sentences. Apparently, a lot of young professionals write in almost a tweet format. This doesn't allow them to have a continuous stream of thought. So when a document is worthy of being written in paragraph form, make sure those paragraphs have at least 3 sentences. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to think of at least 3 sentences to say in every business message. For example, if a recruiter emails you and says, are you available to speak with me tomorrow at 11 o'clock? You don't need to think of 3 sentences worth of ways to tell them yes. This 3-sentence rule only applies to messages that are worthy of being broken into multiple paragraphs. Last is using qualifiers when you're talking about facts. In the business world, you are liable for what you write down. So because of that, if you're talking about facts, state them as facts. And if you're not sure something is a fact, don't write it down because you're going to be liable for that information. It's incredibly important to remember that when you're writing it down at work, it's suddenly a legal document. And this doesn't matter if you're sending in an email, writing a formal letter, or taking notes on a napkin. If it's written down in business, it can be used as a legal document. So be very aware of what you're holding yourself accountable for. Also, remember that cliches don't translate. Cliches are specific to culture, and the business world is so globalized now that cliches simply don't belong. They're not going to translate to everyone. Also, please save yourself time and just don't use Microsoft Word templates. They're designed to be pretty. They're not designed to be business professional, and you will spend far more time fighting the template than you will using it. Also, remember that Mrs. is not appropriate for a business title when you're addressing someone. I've learned since I moved here that in the South we often use Mrs. to show a woman respect. Be aware that this is not true even in the rest of the U.S., much less the rest of the world. The definition of Mrs., if you check the dictionary, is a surname to address a married woman without a higher, honorific, or professional title. Mrs. was never designed to be used in the workplace. It's not professional, and if you use it on someone who has earned a higher title, using that demotes them. For example, If you have a female professor, you wouldn't call them Mrs. Smith instead of Dr. Smith. Be very, very careful of using this surname in the workplace. Now, this is not to say that people can't ask you to call them Mrs. in the workplace, just like people can choose to let you call them by their first name, but never Mrs. someone unless they ask you to do so, because you truly could make a bad impression that way. And finally, remember to be concise, be concise, be concise. After you write your document, you need to go back and revise it. I highly recommend that before you try revising your document, you format it. This is going to help you read what's actually on the page rather than what you think you said or what you meant to say, because it's going to look different. Microsoft has also developed a great revising tool for us called Track Changes. If you've never used Track Changes, there's a YouTube link here for you to watch a short instructional video. Track Changes allows you to edit documents without actually deleting anything, so that if you decide to go back to what you'd written previously, doing so is just a click away.